What's going on, guys? Welcome to the Hustle or Stay Basic podcast. I'm your host, KG, at KG the Hustler, and today I have Emily Hicks, co-founder and president of FREDsense. Emily, thanks so much for being on.
Thanks for having me. My pleasure.
And just to be clear, you are based out of Calgary, right?
Correct, yeah.
So, I think you're my second guest who's been in a different time zone. It's 8:30 here. It's 6 o'clock or 6:30 there?
30. Yeah, 6:30.
Cool. How's everything going in Calgary? How are you and Calgarians managing through the pandemic?
It's been an adventure. I'd say I don't think we're doing that well, but hopefully like vaccinations are increasing and things are getting better, and it's supposed to snow again tomorrow, but spring will someday come. So, I remain optimistic about it.
Yeah, it actually snowed here in Toronto today. It was, I would say, probably an inch of snow, and then went by like 3 o'clock in the afternoon. It was all gone. So weather's being weird. We are in our third or fourth lockdown. I lost track. We're kind of just stuck at home trying to stay sane. But it's good to hear that. We're suffering equally. I don't know if that's good to hear, but
Absolutely.
you got a smile on your face, so it sounds like things are going okay there in Calgary, right?
Absolutely.
Cool. And I found you or your name under a dated article. It was from 2016, and it was like top 30 under 30, and like a lot of people on that list were based out of Calgary. It was top 30 under 30, pretty much across the nation. But I saw a lot of them based out of Calgary. Is there something in the water there that, gives you guys some superpowers to become entrepreneurs and just go chase your dreams over there?
I don't know. Tough to say, but I think Calgary is definitely becoming more of a, trying to become more of a startup, ecosystem. There's a lot of pressure from the university to try to create more of a ecosystem around entrepreneurship and getting that into, curriculum in, for university students in the business school and stuff. So I think there's a lot of exciting things going on. And I think there's some cool people doing a lot of really interesting stuff around the city.
Yeah. And that's an easy segue for me into interesting stuff. I read on, I believe it was either your Instagram profile or on the FREDsense website, but synthetic biology, is that what you're into? Could you explain to like the average Joe, aka me, what is synthetic biology, and why is it exciting?
Yeah, so essentially, yeah, synthetic biology. So that's kind of the core of what we do at FREDsense. And so when I was in my undergraduate degree at the University of Calgary, I got really involved in the International Genetically Engineered Machines competition. So it's called iGEM, and it's essentially a really big synthetic biology competition. And that kind of led us into, forming FREDsense. And so synthetic biology is kind of this idea of how do you standardize genetic engineering? How do you kind of view, organisms as, standard things that you can kind of put together and do really interesting things, and kind of taking an engineering approach to that, excuse me, to that side of things.
No worries. Okay, cool. So I saw that FREDsense itself, the Fred part was capitalized. Is it an acronym?
Yeah, so FRED's an acronym for the field ready electrochemical detector, which is kind of the other piece of what we do. We kind of couple synthetic biology with electrochemistry to make these portable units that people can take into the field and measure certain parameters of their water.
Okay. When you mention electrochemical, I think about these science experiments that I've done way in the past in high school. Stuff with is corrosion something that would be considered electrochemical? With oxidization of metals, is that electrochemical? I'm just throwing a guess out here.
Yeah, you're totally right, and that's what the classic thing people learn in high school is like oxidation reduction. They learn about batteries, sides of it, and so, yeah, that's exactly kind of how we do our sensing. Is that we get our bacteria to kind of detect something in the environment, and then they produce a compound that we essentially oxidize. And when we oxidize it, we get a signal that we can actually measure, and we can relate that back to what was there, in the sample essentially.
Okay, cool. So, I mean, this signal that you're talking about, and I think your main test is checking if water has toxins, essentially. And based on that signal, I guess you're able to tell if there's a lot of toxins or there's no toxins. Could you explain that a bit?
Yeah, so essentially what we do is we use bacteria and we engineer them to be able to detect certain specific contaminants. And so our kind of major commercial sensor detects arsenic. So the bacteria have a genetic circuit in them essentially that allows them to detect arsenic. And when they detect that, they produce this electrochemical signal. So they produce this kind of compound that we're able to oxidize, we're able to get a signal, and we can actually relate that back and say there's, 3 parts per billion or 10 parts per billion arsenic in water. And so what we are kind of aiming to do is build a whole bunch of different, bacteria that all detect different things and allow you to be able to measure, a bunch of different specific contaminants that you might need to know about in your water.
how how quick is that type of detection? Like, if you wanted to test, say, tap water that I had in a glass or something, like how quick is it? And like, how big does the sample size have to be as well?
Yeah, it's a great question. So it does take a little bit of time because the bacteria have to actually recognize it, and then they produce, proteins to respond, and it's, a bit of a signal, some stuff that has to happen. So it takes about, in our test, about 60 minutes to get a response from it. And in terms of the sample, we test about 1 milliliter of sample, so a
Oh wow.
really small volume. And you kind of just plug it into one of our cartridges. The cartridge plugs into one of our devices, and then you're able to get a reading in about an hour of how much arsenic's there.
Okay, cool. And I I know that, and this could be super dumb, but I'm gonna ask all the dumb questions. There's things like Brita filter and different types of water filters that are able to detect, I don't think toxins, but other items that maybe you don't want to have in water and filter those items out. Um, have you guys done tests on things like that? Like, hey, this water's filtered, but does it have any? Is it really filtering out what it says it's filtering out?
Yeah, that's a great question. And we haven't done a lot of testing on those. My understanding is a lot of them don't remove necessarily heavy metals and things like that. And that's kind
Mm,
of that's one of the problems of a lot of filtration systems is they'll remove like bacteria and they'll remove kind of big particulates and stuff, but not necessarily some of the metals or things like that, which can be quite dangerous in water. So we haven't done a lot of testing on that. It'd be something interesting for sure to look at, like how efficient are those kind of things. But that's kind of one of the big applications, not maybe on the consumer level, but we often try to work with treatment companies that are installing some kind of treatment to deal with arsenic, for example, and they need a way to actually measure it before and after to say, hey, this is working. And so that's one of the
mhm.
applications that we have for our product right now.
Okay, so it sounds like a lot of the work you've been doing is with water treatment facilities.
Yeah, we mostly work with treatment companies and utilities. So we work a lot with cities mostly in the states that have arsenic contaminated
Gotcha.
drinking water, which is a super natural thing that just happens from kind of the ground rock formations. And
Yeah,
they need ways to measure it if they're going to treat it effectively.
gotcha. Should I be drinking tap water? I mean, that's the first question that comes to my head.
Yeah, I've learned a lot about water quality in many different cities and places and countries, and I can say that Calgary has really good drinking water. So
Okay.
we've done some tests on Calgary drinking water as like a blank, like a control, because it's really high quality, and we're just lucky with kind of the source that we have access to this. But there's definitely other places in the world that have a lot more contamination issues to deal with. And yeah, there's definitely some places that might think twice about it, but here the quality is really great.
In one of my jobs, and forgive me, I'm not I'm not gonna remember much about it because it was a while back. But I worked as a summer student, and what I did was I collected jugs of water from different areas around Ontario, and we would take it to a lab, and they use something called liquid scintillation counter. It was for radiation. It was checking for radiation.
Yeah.
Um, Is that something similar? Because I remember in that system itself, it was checking for signals. I think this more so radiation signals, whereas yours is checking for contaminant signals. Like what produces the actual signal that you're checking for?
Yeah, so the way that it essentially works is it's this bacteria. So we essentially engineer the bacteria to add in what we call a genetic circuit. And what the genetic circuit does is you can kind of think about it as it has a component that's kind of like an on switch. And when it binds to arsenic or the contaminant of interest, it kind of turns that switch on
Gotcha.
the bacteria to produce a certain compound, and that's what we actually measure. So we measure kind of the downstream of it, but it's kind of the bacteria, their DNA actually interacting with the contaminant and then turning on the switch and producing something in response. So it's a bit of a different technology.
Yeah.
Really, most chemical analysis of water is done with chemistry equipment and stuff like that. It's really quite novel to be using this biological approach.
Hmm.
That's kind of what we think our real innovation is kind of coupling these pieces together to make something that works in the field.
Cool. No, it definitely sounds exciting. What would be some of the aspirations or goals you have with FREDsense?
Our goal is really, right now one of our goals is really to expand the sensors that we offer. So we have this kind of, we have this razor blade model where we sell these boxes that do the detection, and then we sell these cartridges. That's kind of what you actually put the water sample into, and what measures the arsenic. And so our goal is really to have a wide variety of these cartridges that all kind of fit into the same box, so that you could kind of plug and play different cartridges to
Mm.
measure things and kind of put them all in that same box. And so I'm really excited about some of the new, cartridges that we're looking at to detect a variety of different things. And I think, the water sector getting really quick data about what's in a sample is something that's really challenging. And that's, that information can be used in a lot of different, there's a lot of different applications where getting fast data is a really huge advantage. So I'm really excited about, having more sensors and being able to provide a lot more data.
Cool. I mean, uh, 80% of our body, I guess, is water, and I mean,
Yeah.
we we need to make sure it's clean. So that's totally awesome. Um, you are the co-founder of FREDsense, and one of the things I want to know is like, how did you even go about doing that?
Yeah, it's kind of an interesting story. So, I definitely didn't set out to be an entrepreneur. That was not what I thought I would do. I kind of, I in university I went into biomedical sciences, and I very much thought I would probably be a doctor or surgeon. And at my time at university, I got really interested in this genetic engineering competition, iGEM, and just kind of fell in love with working with a big interdisciplinary team, trying to solve interesting challenges and trying to make something with biology. I thought that was really really exciting. And so we did, we entered this competition. We did really well for a couple years. We won a whole bunch of awards. And then when I graduated, we kind of thought, hey, what's the next logical step here? And just very naively, we're like, wow, we'll just start a company. And so we did a series of different business plan pitch competitions and found these different kind of places we could pitch the idea that offered cash prizes, and kind of use that to cobble together, the first kind of round of investment, and found this tiny little lab in the basement of this building that we could rent for super cheap. And just kind
Wow.
of really naively, no idea what we were doing, but just kind of, I was really passionate about the technology and about really seeing it used in the field. I fell in love with this idea of getting people to actually be able to use biology, because you learn so much about really theoretical things when you go to university that it's hard to understand
Yeah.
how something. And so I really like this idea of building something novel with biology and getting it into the hands of people where it could actually do something that would benefit them. And so yeah, it was a very naive starting, but I just fell in love with this kind of idea, and I loved the idea of kind of working collaboratively with people and trying to push this forward. And that's kind of where it all started.
That is awesome. I mean, I love the idea of finding a cheap lab to get started, and coming out of school and being like, hey, let's continue this. Um, I think one of the things that I personally have struggled with, and I know others do as well, is um, kind of these roadblocks that you face, and even the kind of thoughts of, hey, is this worth it? Should I keep continuing? Did you ever face anything like that?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of times, especially in the early days, but yeah, when we first started out, it felt like there was a lot of challenges, and there was a lot of people that were very supportive, but a lot of people really thought this idea was like a little bit crazy, and some kids out of school, kind of have this biology idea, it
Yeah.
just it sounds a little insane. And so we had to be really creative initially. We found this really cheap lab. We bought all our equipment off Amazon and eBay and like government auctions and all sorts of crazy things. Just to kind of get the supplies and get started. And we had to really kind of cobble money together, try to figure out how to do this. But I always kind of thought through the process, like, is it, I didn't know for sure that it was going to work. I didn't know for sure that we were going to be able to get to the next step. Like everything seemed kind of daunting, but I thought, I'm young, this is really exciting, and like I'm going to learn a lot from this process no matter what. Like even if this doesn't
Mhm.
turn out to be the next billion-dollar company, I'm going to learn so much just going through
Yeah.
it. And that's kind of really how I've looked at it, is how much can I learn from this situation, and how much can I, let's just kind of take one step after the other, try to deal with these challenges. But I kind of think, if this were to fail, I wouldn't necessarily, especially in the early days, I wouldn't look back on it and regret, trying something. I'd be glad that I, tried it and gave it my best shot.
Yeah, and I think that's awesome because I mean, if you like doing something, I mean, just do it as long as you're not harming anyone. I don't want no violence coming out of the things you want to do, but I think that's great advice in terms of if you do it and it fails, you can always look back and be like, hey, I learned X, Y, and Z, and I was able to impact, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, what's great about what you're doing is it sounds like you have a great team there, and you're both leaning leaning on each other to push yourselves forward and keep going.
Yeah, the team is a huge kind of, I think, factor. You have to find some really good people that can help you through the tough times and motivate you to keep going, and kind of be that community. Because I really kind of, coming out of academia, I find when you're a student, like you really, a lot of the stuff you do in school is very individual. Like you take tests by
Hmm.
yourself, you do stuff by yourself.
Yeah,
And I don't really like that, because I don't really think it's that effective in terms of getting the most out of things. So finding people you can work well with, and really try to bring different strengths and stuff, I think is just really exciting, and I really like that part of it.
absolutely. I wanted to ask you, and this might be like a super deep question. It's just something super random, but I mean, what would you say um, would have to happen for FredSense or for your career for you to look back and be like, this was the greatest decision ever, or this worked out exactly as how I wanted it to work out. And you could might as well you could technically be like, I'm okay at that point right now, but just wanted to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think I've always kind of gone into this with really with that passion of seeing this biological thing do something useful in the world, and see that
Hmm.
impact something. And I'm really excited about synthetic biology and about genetic engineering, and what kind of potential it can hold to do things. And I really want to see that in my hands, like we've created something that can do that. So I've always really had that motivation. So the financial side of it, it'd be nice to make some money, but it's not really the thing that motivates me at the end of the day. It's really kind of seeing this in the hands of people. And so I think for me, if we could launch some products that I felt like, I could see users, end users using them in the field, and, being able to get this data and it making a difference to them, and, being able to change something for them. I think that would be just, an amazing experience, to think that, I was able to use biology and build something that actually, achieved an important purpose, and did something.
No, that's awesome. I had a feeling you would say that as well. I mean, it sounds like your main goal with FredSense is to get the product in people's hands and for them to actually notice the difference and notice how valuable it is uh, in the industry. The one thing I wanted to touch up on is biology, and biology is taught in high school. And personally, I did not take biology. Just did not enjoy it. from what I've seen. I was just like, that's kind of over my head. I'm not going to go do biology. But there are a lot of people that do biology, and then out of high school, they're like similar to what you kind of alluded to. You're like doctor, surgeon. Like, I guess I'm going to follow that career path. I think it's because you stumbled upon the iGEM program that you went the other route. Um, Other than listening to podcasts like this, what can people passionate in science do to kind of open up their different career opportunities?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think kind of going to school, going through high school, I had no idea what I wanted to do at all.
Yeah,
Um, Zero idea. And I liked biology. I took it in high school and I absolutely loved it. But I also loved drama. I loved band. I loved math. Like I wasn't really sure what I wanted to do.
yeah,
And going through undergrad, I found that, there's really only two options that were presented a lot to me. That was medicine, becoming a doctor or a surgeon, or going into academia. So being a graduate student, getting a PhD and maybe becoming a professor. Like those are kind of the
yeah,
choices I see
yeah,
time. But the truth is like neither of those are really, professors is a very, very, very small percent of people, are cut out to and want to kind of go that route. And not everyone wants to be a doctor either. And so I think what I didn't really realize is how many jobs and opportunities there are for things related to science that aren't necessarily, aren't
mm,
either of those things. Like there's so many jobs around science communication, around patents, intellectual property, around, clinical trials, you know, technical sales people. Like there's just so many different opportunities that I never knew about. And so I think there's now, more programs and stuff that people can start to figure that out. But I'd say try to find people that have interesting positions and maybe interview them. Lots of times I get students that ask me for a 15-20 minute interview to just kind of figure out what do we do at FREDsense? What does that even look like? Because
yeah,
they don't know what does an industry position
exactly.
look like. Who knows? You're not really taught that. And so I think the earlier you can reach out to people, try to find podcasts are great. Sometimes the university or other programs will run different events. They'll bring in panels sometimes of different speakers,
Hmm.
different positions. I took a really interesting biotech course when I was in university that kind of let you figure kind of profile different professions that were related to biology but
Oh,
weren't
cool.
bench science. And that was super interesting because I just didn't even know that these things existed. And so I think the more people can see those kind of things, they might, I think people that might not see themselves as scientists because they maybe don't see themselves as a doctor or a professor, might realize that if they love science, there's so many other ways that they can do science and be involved in science that aren't the traditional route that you might think about.
Yeah, I I think that's great advice. I mean, um, th- science is vast. There's definitely a lot of people that are just not doctors, surgeons, professors. I think it's just getting around that thought process of like um, what you see, and if you keep on seeing doctors and you keep on seeing surgeons and like on TV and in magazines, I mean, you might think that's the only option. So um, yeah, that's great advice. I think reaching out to people in the industry and asking them what's available. I think that's super great advice. Thanks for that. I think just to wrap this up, is there anything else? I mean, you already shared a lot of great advice, but is there anything else that you would want to share for anyone passionate in science or just someone trying to figure out what to do? I mean, we all go through life and we all try to figure out what to do. It seems like you figured out what you want to do. Um, yeah, is there any advice that you could possibly give out?
Yeah, that's a great question. I'd say, the first thing I'd say is not to just stress too much about it, especially, if you're young. I feel like there's this idea you
Yeah,
have to find a university degree that's going to lead you to a job, and it has this straightforward path that you're just going to, get on. And once you kind of choose one thing, you can't change your mind. And
yeah,
it really isn't like that. I changed my degree. Many people change multiple times, and even if you get a degree in something, that doesn't mean you can't do something else. Or even if you don't go to university or college, there's still so many opportunities. And so I think I would say try things. Like if I hadn't tried this iGEM competition, I never would have known about
mm,
synthetic biology and that was something that interested me. So I think the more you can get involved in different things, instead of especially student, just focusing academics are important, but not just focusing on school, but trying to get involved in different things, whether it's volunteering or clubs or internships or, whatever it is, just try to figure out, what are these things that make you excited? And I think you don't have to feel that pressure to decide, right away. You can let yourself, explore and try new things. But, I think that's kind of the easiest, I kind of fell into this because I, tried this opportunity. So I think the more you have those kind of chances, I think the more likely you are to find something. And I think also not being afraid to I don't want to say give up, but, to change course if you need to. If you start into something that, isn't fulfilling you, you don't have to finish it. You can, you have flexibility, you can control your own future, and you can, find something else.
Yeah, and I think that's been a common theme in, I would say, probably the last 3 or 4 episodes I recorded, that volunteering or trying things is a great option. And yeah, I mean, when you say like, hey, you don't have to stick to something if you don't like it, and you can change up. I think that opportunity is 100% present for many people. It's just you could say timelines, social timelines on like where you should be at a certain age and what you should be doing. I feel like those pressures are amplified due to things like social media.
Yeah.
But I totally do agree with you and what you were saying in terms of trying things. You wouldn't know it, but I actually did engineering, a technical engineer, and then I went to process, and from process I'm learning finance. So I'm just always just jumping to things that I find interesting. And yeah, I'm definitely finding the finance side really interesting. And I was like, hey, why didn't I go to school for business? Why did I do engineering? But yeah, I wouldn't know if I didn't try just applying myself to it. So that's great advice. Thanks so much, Emily, for coming on. It's late-ish here. It's not that late, but it's late-ish here. But I really appreciate you making time for me and sharing your story.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thanks so much for having me. It was fun to chat with you.
All right. Thanks everyone for listening. If you enjoyed the podcast, please subscribe to the channel. I'll be dropping Emily's links below to FREDsense and the iGEM contest as well. So thanks again for listening, and I'll catch you guys later. See ya.